reading this kind of thing, and I know that I will love reading that author, and that's exactly the kind of person or professor I really want to spend time with. I think it takes people time to work through, and that's why I was talking about kind of figuring out who you are. I think that's an ongoing thing for everyone, but it's a particularly kind of privileged moment, I think, as a doctoral student, to have that time to actually be focused on that, kind of who you are, how you express yourself, what do you think about things. And I think that the advice about kind of developing the smart side of who you are doesn't mean, and I think you have to be careful about this, but turning yourselves inside out, wondering what others will think of you and what you should have done. And you can't get yourself kind of tied up with these shoulds. You have to kind of move forward. On the other hand, it's true that if you spend 7 years, I don't know what the time limitation for different schools is, but let's say you spend the 7 years and you haven't actually published anything, and you're very nervous about showing any of your work to anyone, at some point people will say, well, right, you actually have to be able to communicate your stuff. You can't, it's not all about sitting and just thinking stuff through. So, but I think I don't think that that's doing it for anyone else. I think it's really doing it for you, because I think that you become quite a tortured individual if you can't get it out of your head. You're just going to keep festering inside. So there you go.
And can I just, like, one of the things that's just very cool is that you're all experts in your topic, and no one else in the whole universe knows your topic as well as you do. And so that's really something to be confident about. And I totally agree. You shouldn't overconference. I was like a conference slut. Well, and that worked for me. But I don't actually recommend it, because it can be very distracting. But I forced myself to do it because I was really shy, and my supervisor said, she's told me to go to conferences to get over that, and also to force myself to ask questions, even if it's the dumbest question. But that was another way that I was shy, was to ask questions at conferences, to kind of develop confidence in my ability to question what's been stated. So I did that, and as you go through, it is very cool, because all of a sudden someone goes, well, what about blah, blah, blah? And you're like, well, actually, this, and this, and that case totally does this, and this writer said this. Like, it actually builds your confidence when you can respond to those challenges, because you know it better than anyone else. And it's all very familiar to you. It's all at the back of your head. So, I mean, if you're feeling not confident, I would actually suggest going the conference, doing a few conferences, and putting yourself there so that you develop that, because it does develop your confidence. Yeah.
I think we have, thank you both very much. It's a lot to think about. I was taking notes badly, even though it's recorded. But I expect people have questions. We have about 10 minutes that we could take questions, but I would like to underline the fact that going to conferences is good, especially student conferences you mentioned, but I think that's very good for people's comfort level, like the one that we have here. And organizing workshops is it's an important skill. So what questions do we have? Here and then Laurent. Okay.
Because it's the second academic career I participated this year, but it's for me so interesting, if not too interesting. It is nothing about ethics in academic career, how we can have a good professor. Doesn't matter, just knowledge, just transfer. But kind of people know after many years, I'm afraid to tell hi to some of professors. I know them because always they are like this, and I'm there, not me. For example, for them, a student just doesn't exist. That is no ethics, nothing to human relationship between a student and professor. That is nothing for me. Just like computer, I'm looking for something, and after that I ask the professor tick, and he or she will answer me. It's stop. After that, it's nothing coming, nothing really.
Well, I think it's interesting, because what you just described, I would say, adds it to kind of mistaken pictures both of a professor, what it means to be a professor, and what it means to be a student. And because a student shouldn't simply be looking for answers. Anybody, I mean, the computer actually helps sharpen this idea, because you know that you can go get an answer to something without ever talking to anyone. So it can't be that that's kind of what it means to be a student. And at the same time, it can't be that a professor is basically a website, right? Or the kind of the equivalent of Google. Because we can't ever hope to be as good as Google in terms of getting you to some answer. I mean, one of the things I've done, I was going to say personally, I guess personally, but also institutionally as Associate Dean Graduate Studies here over the last 3 years, is actually put together some perhaps surprising supervisory relationships and kind of enforced them. And both professors and students have questioned me often on them. And I think it's often to avoid precisely this kind of image on both ends about what it means to get something out of that ethical partnership of learning that should be happening for both. Yeah, I think Anthea next. Yeah.
I guess as a student, like at the start of, say, graduate studies, to me the question is, like, unless you have, and I think in some ways maybe sometimes it's happened more in undergraduate because you're understood as someone who still doesn't have access to the knowledge of what it means to be, like, a graduate student or within the academy. Like, I feel like, yes, there are conferences, yes, there are journals, but like it feels like a city I've never been to, and it's huge. It's so vast. Like even if you think about the journals that publish in your field, like across the world internationally, there are so many, and you almost have to have a professor say to you, well, that's the one I suggest you would publish in, because without that knowledge isn't accessible to us ever, or that's a really good conference to go to. And as soon as a prof who cares about your work says that to you, you do it, and that's the map. And I don't know how you get around that, and I find it incredibly disempowering because I don't have that information until someone's kind enough to just forward me an email and be like, maybe you should think of like going to this, and that happens seldomly, I'd say, sometimes, and sometimes it happens all at once, and you feel good because it's like, oh, now I have a little map, and I can navigate my way through, and I don't know how you get out of this really, like, I actually feel like so much of that knowledge is locked down and really there are amazing professors who do that for you, and when no one's doing it for you, it is really isolating because I don't know where to look. Like if I was to feel like I feel like I want to go to a conference because I would like to present this paper because I feel like that would make me feel better right now. It's like, of course I can ask, but again, it's such that hierarchy makes it difficult to just say, you know, like to elicit that knowledge, and even if you are asking, again, it's like there's no other way to get it except to ask someone who might know, and I find that a really difficult position to be in. I can't imagine what it looks like unless someone says, just give me like one bit of information and then you create a little world. I don't know.
Do people know about conference alerts? Do you know this website, conference alerts? It's kind of a useful thing. I got on it when I was, I think just Google conference alerts, and it says like what kinds of conferences are you interested in? So I was like law, film, literature, human rights, gender, I think is what I put. And then every month it gives me an alert of conferences that are international, that happen, that are in my area. And that's where I discovered some of the more actually smaller and more obscure conferences where I actually got more out of it than just the standard Congress. I'm not knocking Congress, I love Congress, but yeah, so and this is just like a very, very practical tip.
No, that's
put yourself on conference
there's
alerts.
no way we know of. Like these little things that maybe as a prof you've known about for 10 years, and it's like, well, how do we know? How do you learn that stuff? Like someone said recently, you know, the back of the journal often lists books that the journal might be open to you reviewing if they're in your field. Like nobody tells. Like it's interesting how that knowledge is passed down in such a haphazard way, and when you hear it, you're like, oh, that's great. But you don't hear it for so long, you know, and I think it's hard. It's a hard position to be in sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's kind of one of those things. It's exactly what you said. You like get this one thing, and you're like, oh, I get this, and then it kind of builds itself. But if you're not given, like, you don't even know where to start when you're at the start. And I'm just going to plug something while I'm up here. I happen to be book review editor for the Canadian Journal of Law and Society. So,